Hi,
Hello
Louise.
again. Hi. I'm always trying to get in there but ahead of you now, and I'm like, I should just leave it alone.
Well, I never know, so I don't want to
I
have a long pause. It's my anxiety that makes me jump into it.
what you have anxiety, adoptees? Can't believe it.
Oh, not me. We are on chapter 2, Facing Our History, The
Yeah,
Adoptee's Journey by Cameron Lee Small. He is a really great writer.
he is, and he lays out a whole thing for people to kind of, which I didn't know this was getting into,
It's
but
like
like a
a almost like a
plan.
work, yeah, a plan for dealing with this stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's really
Really,
neat.
really good. I mean, he's writing it for people in the church, but it's also really good,
Yeah, for anybody.
a good blueprint for
Yeah,
any adopted person.
yeah,
Um,
right out of the gate. You want to start? Start with what it says. I like what it says.
oh, the little
Mm-hmm.
um, which part?
Oh, yeah,
The two
this.
quotes, because I was jumping right ahead to his covenant of
Oh yeah, go do the covenant.
which was in under the authority of President Chun Du-hwan. The social purification movement would grow to become one of the most disturbing human rights violations in Korea during the 1980s. Government
Mm,
subsidies were granted to welfare centers based on how many people they detained.
crazy.
Um, think about that. Like
I
you're
know.
getting money by
Yep.
grabbing people.
And they had this the brothers home or something,
Oh yeah.
and they would
Uh-huh.
grab kids off the street, unattended children, ship them to welfare centers, falsely brand them as orphans. I mean, what
Mm-hmm.
is this
This is
like?
like Georgia Tan, which he
Georgia
does
Tan.
mention
Yeah.
in the
He,
later in the chapter.
I mean, it's like facing our history. He's facing Korea's history, but this is our history too.
Right. It's
Anywhere we can take children and sell them.
mm-hmm. This is a worldwide practice.
Yeah. Oh, that goes into the quote. I'm going to read that first quote because it
Okay.
kind of, I liked it. We must be willing to free many cruel truths, those we keep hidden from other people and those we keep hidden from ourselves. We have to be willing to suffer the loss of these things that have saved us in the past, but which have simultaneously stood in the way of our freedom.
Yeah.
By Sarif. It wasn't his quote. Sif, somebody named Sif, but it just,
Um,
yeah.
it said Brothers Home paid bribes to police and municipal staff, like you said.
Mhm.
Historically, an adoptee is assumed to have gained the world while escaping some kind of dreadful destiny that would have occurred had they been left intact with their family of origin or place of birth.
Yeah.
It's not so, I mean, that's a big piece. It's just
Yep.
that's the assumption. And you still when you tell someone you're adopted, oh, that's so great, and
Right away.
that's
Yeah.
just the natural assumption. And he's like and it's not that we're saying it definitely would have been better. That is not the point.
Nope. No, it's erasing people's histories.
Mm-hmm.
And I like this part because I saw it the other day on social media when I was looking, scrolling, TikTok, and it says hashtags like adoption is
Uh,
love, adoption saves lives, adoption rocks, and we don't see color are a few of the modern human purification systems and socially sanctioned covenants that propose to no adoptees, but end up objectifying us,
mm-hmm.
abducting us into the purposes of whatever spiritual or political campaign is being championed at the time.
Mm-hmm. Done under the name of religion and then I like that he says adoptees should have help. And to
Mm-hmm.
begin with, maybe our birth families should have help too.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, we say this, we talk about this all the time on the podcast, but it's just, I was thinking about actually carrying this book around with me,
Yeah.
honestly, because these conversations do come up like when I'm at work or wherever,
Yep.
and I'd like to be able to pull this out and show these things because this is not
Me
just,
too. And you know what happens, which he even talks about in here, is when you're an adoptee, you get emotional. Like, so someone's talking,
right,
if someone starts talking about you as an adopted person, you instantly start getting emotional because you know inside some things they don't know. And then you can't speak about it correctly. It's like this, and then you come off like, oh, well, there's a disgruntled adoptee or whatever.
right.
Or you say the wrong thing and they're like, what? You're not, but it's like, no, look, here's a
Or they'll say,
blueprint.
well, what do you just think? You shouldn't have adoption. And then you have to
Yeah.
go into this whole thing. I
Yeah.
like how he said several and then, what you were talking about, that
Yeah.
hashtag. Several scholars suggested transracial adoption is an extension of colonization, where
Mm,
white adopters from colonizing nations adopt children of color from colonized nations. Through
yeah.
forced assimilation, the adopted child subsequently loses their connections to the cultural, racial, and ethnic communities.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know?
And like even just, white on white adoptees who have lost their background.
Right.
You lose who you are. So you're always morphing into someone else's story from the minute you're
Right.
born. And he makes big points about that, like what it does to your brain, what it does to your system. You can't regulate, you don't have the calmness that someone else just has in life,
Mm-hmm.
because you're having to layer something that you know is not true, but you're like, wait,
And then you
it's
have to try to read those around you. And
right.
how do I fit in here? How do I
Yeah,
hide myself? Clearly, myself is not
important.
good enough because I was given up.
Wait, I,
Clearly, myself isn't good enough because I was given up to begin with, or whatever
yeah,
the
yeah,
story that your young self made up. He
yeah.
goes into this the new covenant, about
Mm,
the adoptees become pressed into a social intercourse, right?
yeah.
The new covenant becomes a promise to lie. Yes, I'm thankful, and any other experience would be a slight not worth mentioning. No, I am without doubt or question. Yes, this outcome is better than anything else I could possibly. No, I don't think about my birth family. After all that's been done for me,
Yeah,
or the lies are the basis for a new unquestionable covenant. You are worth, and this is what
yeah.
I was just saying, what you say to yourself is a little,
Yes.
you are worthless, neglect. You deserve to be hurt, abuse. You can't trust anyone, abandonment. You are weak and powerless, lack of choice and control.
Yep. And it shapes us because how many
Mm-hmm.
adoptees do we know? Anecdotally, all of us have some form of this.
Yeah.
That's not the normal. A lot of people have these things in life from lots of different reasons, but there is such an underlying truth in it. Even for
Mm-hmm.
adoptees who haven't looked into any of this, now that when you meet them, you're like, oh, you can see it. It's like we apologize up front,
I know.
for
Yeah.
who we
I'm sorry
are.
for my existence.
Yeah.
Um,
There was something
I,
on disorder. What did I write here? Oh, he was talking about institutions could ask different questions,
right. That's
right?
what I was
Oh
that's
yeah.
funny. That's
Good.
exactly what, yeah, that we always choose the same things instead
Yeah.
of, you know,
Mm-hmm.
what's right about adoption and what's wrong with adoptees? Those are the questions that are loaded with overly simplified moral judgments, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, different
The,
questions.
the status quo tends to be the center of our dysfunction
Right.
We're- and interpret our inclination to know and tell our stories. Yeah. Yeah. This is big. And then he goes into this woman, Rhea,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a long thing with her, but he has these key points. Like, she has
Right.
a whole long story. It'd be like a whole nother chapter here, but he has these key points. A new beginning is not synonymous with no beginning.
Right.
And her whole thing is from that, right?
Yes.
Does he know her through the church? I think she comes to him for help, I think, to know her
Yeah.
story. And yeah, it's
And then he had yeah, let's read his other key points. It's a really long,
yes.
in-depth, deep chapter, and I really hope that our listeners are reading along.
Yes.
It's such a
Incredible.
good book. Another key point, if you want to resist the curse of adoption, you'll need to reclaim a language of truth. Love is enough is a believable rule until our unique and specific needs become diminished or disappear underneath it. Some
Yeah.
adoptees feel too intimidated to request for that love to show up here and now in a way that meets them warmly and effectively in the personalized details of their lives.
Yeah. Our live podcast guest, Chris, that was
Mm-hmm.
on, he brought up how we even came up with the word put up for adoption
Oh yeah,
and
that was from the auctions.
from the auctions. And so when you say
Mm-hmm.
you're put up for adoption, it's actually, yeah, you're put up in front of people, sold.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so it's all about free, like he says, language is important, right? We have to make new rules. Adoption is the loss of love in a language, but veiled in the language of love.
Mm-hmm.
Whose lies are we trying to protect? That I don't know why, but he just has these zingers where I'm like, wow.
And I like this where he said, talking about how important, historically language is a kind of laundering convention
Yeah.
used to describe adoptees or that we use to describe ourselves.
Yeah.
It has been deployed as a family separating apparatus to shape the way we think about the experience, and it distracts casual observers from taking time to critique the process. Like, so that
Yeah.
when we're now here talking to people and critiquing the
Yeah.
process, they're so ingrained. We here,
Yeah.
you would have been a prostitute if you weren't adopted. You would still be out on the street. You'd be dead. But are there other options? Is it possible adoption is not the gold standard for child welfare? That adoptive parents are not enough? Who could benefit from a different kind of rule? I love these
Adoptee.
questions.
I do too. I do too. That's when he does this. So this is why you need to read along. He actually has a crisis, like he identifies what is your
Mm-hmm.
crisis and then what
Mm-hmm.
is your roadmap. So like if you're in crisis and I think he kind of does this, like you said, throughout the church and for people who are suffering what he suffered, then it's like, okay, I'm in crisis now. What is my roadmap? How do I get myself safely through this? Which I think
Yes.
every adoptee could benefit from, to be honest with you. Like,
Oh, I do too.
I
There's a
could have
whole,
used
it's
this
like
years
a,
ago.
I could have used this years ago.
Hmm.
It's a whole workbook. So yeah,
Yeah,
I would definitely recommend getting the
digging
book
in.
and having the physical
Yeah,
book.
me
It's
too.
kind of like, remember the years ago there was the artist's way or whatever, and you would
Yeah.
write,
Oh, I have it
it's kind
right
of
here.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of what I feel this is for adoptees.
Yeah.
It's a workbook.
It's a workbook because I feel like sometimes people reach out to us and ask us things,
Mm-hmm.
and we just know our journey, but he actually spells out safe, how to do things safely for yourself and what are your goals? What are your intentions? Do you want to find your family? If you want to, what are you trying to get from it? Set yourself up for expectations, all these things, because I think we all kind of willy-nilly, we all of a sudden come to this realization, then we jump in, then we get hurt, and then I just think it's great.
It's a
But
real thoughtful,
it is. Yeah.
yeah, and then we'll just close with his final key point. For adoptees and those who advocate on our behalf, being known and knowing our history can be part of that process, that we might find a way out of the grave and be reconciled with the ones who put us there.
Yeah. Because he talks about it as a death,
I know.
because you're killing one person to become another.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
when you think about it
Like
like that,
Severance, people. You got to watch Severance is very much the
I still
adoptee
have to
show.
watch that.
Okay. So next week we've got chapter 3, loss and grief.
Yeah, this is great. All right.
Yeah. And
I
now
want
we
to,
have Becky coming up.
yeah,
So yeah, good story. So I will see you in a minute.
see you in a minute.